Gentlemen, since the tape froze, I'm going to do it. Spinning the law, spinning the law, spinning the law, spinning the law. With attorney Kendall Coffey. See, Kendall, I tried.
You got a fantastic future.
Oh, I'm
music.
telling you, you want to represent me in my rock and roll career? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll do it on a percentage.
Hey, welcome back, sir. How are you?
Great to be back. Thanks for having me, Steve.
My pleasure. Famed attorney Kendall Coffey, author of Spinning the Law, and we do this segment for those of you who just joined us this week in WFTL, Big Talk 850 down in Florida, for instance, down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. We do this with one of your hometown folks every Thursday when we can at this time. All right, let's talk about a couple of things, and let's start with the it really is, to me, a circus and such a travesty of justice going on down at Fort Hood, Texas. The military judge overseeing the trial of admitted gunman Major Nadal Hassan told his defense attorneys today that they cannot drop out of the case. Yesterday, they requested that they be relieved of their duties as backup attorneys because Hassan is representing himself because they said that he wants to die. He's working with the prosecutors to get a guilty verdict, and that they believe it's tantamount to helping him commit suicide. But the judge said, you have to stay. What? No. What good are they if that's how they feel?
Well, it's a terrible dilemma for the lawyers, but the judge is probably doing what she has to do. The reality is that this is an inevitability. We know how this trial is going to turn out. I think we know how the sentence is going to turn out, but there is a track record of cases like this in the military justice system where there are years and years of appeals and a fair number of reversals. So even the most clear-cut imaginable case for the death penalty, and this seems to be just that, has a judge being mindful, properly mindful of avoiding errors. One of the realities is constitutional right to represent yourself. There's just no getting around that. So she's got to let him represent himself. On the other hand, she's trying to at least have lawyers standing by so that if he's got questions about legal issues, procedural issues, he can indeed have standby counsel. That's a feature that judges have insisted upon properly. You remember the case of Zacarias Moussaoui,
yeah,
the card-carrying of al-Qaeda, in effect. Same dilemma for the judge. He insisted on representing himself. There was standby counsel there. In the civilian system, at least Moussaoui was able to plead guilty to the capital terrorism offenses and actually pled guilty, so that the court did not have to go through weeks and weeks of testimony to prove up his commission of the crimes. In the military system, as a capital case, they can't accept a guilty plea. So we have weeks of what has to be an ordeal for everybody involved. But, Steve, it's going to get to the right place, and at least it vindicates the huge amount of legal rights that people have in this country, even accused terrorists.
Yeah, and, we talked to Staff Sergeant Sean Manning, who was shot 6 times and was facing the possibility, and in fact he was supposed to do it yesterday, but because they had that early dismissal yesterday, he may be doing it right now, faced the prospect of, like others, of being cross-examined by the man who shot him. That's where this whole thing gets so bizarre, and what most people don't realize, as you said, is that he did plead guilty. He wanted to just plead guilty, but you're not allowed to, so that's why we're going through all this. But there's it's just a bad taste in my mouth. Just think of the witnesses who have to face this guy and try to control themselves.
Well, and of course, it's got to be awful for the victim witnesses. Ted Bundy represented himself. We know how that turned out.
Yep.
But one of the features, though, that I think deserves attention with respect to the victims is, so far the surviving victims and the families of the murdered victims are not being accorded the status that would increase the benefits if this were recognized as a crime of terrorism. If it were a crime of terrorism, then in effect the murdered victims would be soldiers who were killed in combat, because we do have a war against terror, and people like Hassan are at war against us. for reasons which frankly mystify me. The government has taken the position that this is a workplace rage killing rather than the actions of a terrorist. And we know that Hassan was communicating with Anwar al-Awlaki, the
cleric,
terrorist
yep,
who was eventually killed in a drone strike. There's every reason to believe that he was motivated by terrorist hatred of us. He was trying to kill soldiers who were being deployed overseas, including to Afghanistan. So why this is not seen as what it is, an act of a terrorist, murder of a terrorist, and why our fallen soldiers and their survivors and those who are wounded or maimed are not getting the full level of benefits they're entitled to. Steve, I don't get that.
Yeah, well, we've done a lot on this, Kendall, and it's a travesty. We're going to do some more on it, and the fact of the matter is, the White House or the government's excuse is if the president, if they classified this as an act of terror, it would deny him somehow his due process, which I think is kind of insane. In fact, the president alluded to this in his speech on terrorism 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, and actually said, and we've played the soundbite as recently as yesterday, that sometimes you have someone in the United States who is influenced by outside jihadists, and they said, which is what seems to have happened at Fort Hood. So, and I asked Sean Manning if that gives him some ray of hope, and he said, well, maybe a little, but they're suffering a great injustice by this politically correct game that our administration's playing.
And the excuse I heard is, well, if he were treated as a terrorist, he'd have to be shipped off to Guantanamo. Well, that's not real.
Yeah.
We tried plenty of terrorists, including Moussaoui, including many other names we could talk about, in the civilian courts in this country. So I'm mystified. You're mystified. Maybe at some point, hopefully, the administration will change its policy or at least come up with a better explanation.
Well, absolutely. Hopefully, these people will get what's coming now. Let's move on to one more. We're talking to Kendall Coffey here on the Steve Malzberg Show. The Obama administration is now going to use, apparently, housing, HUD, Department of Housing, Urban Development, in an effort to diversify neighborhoods. This, a lot of people claiming this is tantamount to social engineering. They're going to impose a new rule that would allow the feds to track diversity in every American neighborhood and then push policies to change those that it deems to be discriminatory. The policy is going to be called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. Say that 3 times fast. And it's going to require HUD to gather data on segregation, discrimination in every single neighborhood, and then try to remedy it. How far could they, without Congress, go?
Well, I don't think there are 2 phases to this. The first one seems to be information gathering on diversity, on discrimination in neighborhoods. And they may have a lot of the core data, at least with respect to demographics, based on a census. So the assembly and the configuration of information is one thing. I don't think that becomes an issue for Congress or the courts. But then what do they do with it, and where do they go? For example, they're going to retool zoning laws, which is one of the things they've talked about in very amorphous terms. Well, zoning laws are a local matter. And frankly, the federal government is not in a position, legally or otherwise, to be adjusting local zoning laws. Short of approving actual discriminatory intent. That's the standard, which, of course, I don't think they're going to be in a position to prove in all but the most extreme cases. They're not in a business or in a position to retool the zoning laws. They may be talking about it, but whenever they get to the stage of actually implementing things, I am extremely skeptical. I've read about they're sort of tossing out the possibility that it's going to affect housing finance policy. Well, if you're going to give racially based preferences or diversity-oriented preferences in terms of housing finance subsidies, in other words, giving more money based on ethnic or racial considerations, is that what they're going to talk about down the road, Steve?
Well, yeah, that's...
Does anybody have a lawyer to know that that's going to have plenty of constitutional objections if they try to go in that direction? So I think that part of what they're talking about, fine, collect the data, analyze it, come up with a thoughtful assessment of how we are. Take the country's temperature in terms of diversity. That may be legitimate, but to start retooling, engineering, changing neighborhoods using the federal power, that is a stunning thing to comprehend, and one that has more legal problems than you can shake a stick at.
I would agree. My fear, though, is if they ever do that, I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to look like by that time. And if Obama gets another appointee or two, I'm just afraid they would just sign off on whatever it is that he put into place, and our nation will once again be changed, forever.
Well, you recall there was a lot of controversy many years ago with respect to what they call cross-busing to effectuate school desegregation.
Right, sure.
And it was all based on a sociological report and studies. There was a lot of ordeals and a lot of expense for a lot of communities, and yet at the end of the day, the report card on all of that is very, very uncertain. I don't think there's a good track record for really achieving these kind of things. I'm not talking about the removing barriers to discrimination. We all agree with that. This country has passed the question of whether there should be discrimination at any level. But you're talking about something very, very different now. And the track record of success for the federal government getting in and redefining neighborhoods and revising for the good the way people live is a very slim track record.
Well, good, and I hope it stays that way. And I thank you, Kendall, as always. Great talking to you, and have a great week, and hopefully we'll reconvene next Thursday.
And I love your singing voice. I want to hear more of it.
You don't. Believe me, you don't. But thank you. Kendall Coffey, ladies and gentlemen, author of Spinning the Law, of course, and that book, by the way, which is, it's got to be 3 years old by now, at least 4 years old maybe. Kendall, so he doesn't come on to plug the book. I'm the only one who mentions it, but the segment is called Spinning the Law, and in that book, though, all the great cases that he was involved in after the 2000 election with Bush v. Gore and also Elian Gonzalez, and just a wonderful read if you love the law and you love the cases. Anyway, so what's going on here, what the Obama administration is trying to do, basically what they would love to do is say, hey, what do you got, 98%? Chappaqua, New York, where Hillary Clinton lives, is one of the whitest towns, areas in all of the United States of America. Statistically, at least it was a couple of years ago. So she would have to be the first one to have her neighborhood, if you will, change. But imagine the federal government coming into your neighborhood, changing zoning laws and saying, wait a minute, you got too many white people here. Or you got too many black people here. You got to put some black people here, some white people here, some Hispanics here. Are you kidding me? I know we no longer live in the United States of America that I grew up in. We no longer live in the United States of America that existed under George W. Bush.